Welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, and you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's installment of The Wonderful World of Wine. I am Kim Simone here with my co-host, Mark Lenzi. How are you today, Mark?
Everything's great, Kim. How are you today?
I am wonderful, and we have a very special guest joining us today, all the way from San Francisco, California. We have Shelley Lindgren, who is an author, restaurateur, winery owner, Italian wine maven, all sorts of things that we are just super excited to talk to Shelley about. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the title, The Wonderful World of Wine, because it sure is. I love it.
Well, thank you. So, would you give our listeners just a little bit of your background? I know you are very, very well known in the San Francisco wine community and in Greater California, but maybe not as well known out here in Massachusetts and on the East Coast. So, just tell us a little bit about what you're up to and what's your wine story.
Oh, well, out in Boston, you're a little closer to Italy than we are in California, that's for sure. But growing up in Northern California, I actually didn't even realize I was growing up in wine country. Of course, there's history and there were some wineries, but it was very agricultural. And I think sometimes people forget that wine is farming and agricultural too, because you get this beautiful product at the end. But when you do go to Italy, my focus ended up taking me to for my professional career for the most part. At least the last 26 years of it. So we've been open at A16 over 21 years here. I didn't know what Neapolitan pizza was. I hadn't had burrata. I had very little knowledge of the south of Italy. So we found ourselves, 2004, iPhones hadn't come out yet. We were doing MapQuest. We didn't really Google and find as much as you can find today if you're traveling to lesser known parts of the world in so many places. But what was great was we still found beautiful wines and all these remote corners of whether you're in Irpinia, Avellino area, east in the hills east of Naples, or islands off the Amalfi Coast, like Ischia, the depth of Sicilian wines. I think when we opened, I could get a couple Etna Rossos, and now there's hundreds available. So a lot has changed in the world of Italian wine and also in the direction of California wine. As in now, growing up in Northern California, we would cut down our Christmas trees, go get pumpkins, have a lot of different areas like the Gravenstein Highway for apples and Sonoma and things. And it's still there. You can still find it, but there is a whole lot of vineyards in California now. So,
Shelley, you have so many, I want to say, wine recognitions. We've had a lot of guests on the show, and I'm so impressed by the things I've read that you have. You were named Best New Somm, Best Wine Director, Best Wine Program. You were knighted by the Italian government, James Beard winner, Wine Spectator Awards, just amazing resume. What would you say you're most proud of in achieving in the wine world? And can you tell our listeners a little bit about some of those awards?
Absolutely. Well, the James Beard is something that I think will always be a highlight in being such a restaurant person and really like been brought up in families, not my own family, but been brought into families of restaurants. And then we created our own here. So we laugh about this one though a little because just being a small neighborhood restaurant, which is also, become a destination too, thankfully, we would be nominated for the James Beard Award. And I think it was like 6 or 7. And they started saying that I was like the Susan Lucci of the James Beard nominations, but the thing about not winning, but being nominated over again is such a wonderful, like grateful thing. And because, once you win, you won. And eventually they were nice enough to give it to me. So it's fun.
Well, sometimes just being nominated is part of the recognition as well.
1000%. When I've talked to lots of people who, have asked our sommelier world about or like reaching out and congratulating people, we always want to raise up everyone in our industry as much as we can because it's definitely community focused and just saying enjoy it, enjoy every minute and getting to all be in one room where it's like a national award show is pretty special because because we live in a big country that's really diverse and offers lots of different cultural lifestyles of food and wine. And it's a good time to be in the wine consumer part of business in the world too.
Will you talk a little bit about how you approach food and wine together? I mean, you have this Italian wine focus, and your restaurants are also Italian focused. So, as you have sort of expanded your restaurants, and you're not just based in California, correct? You have restaurants in other parts of the world as well, or is it just California?
Oh, we have two locations with partners in Japan. One in Tokyo that opened 15 years ago, and in Yokohama it opened about 9 years ago. And that's been an incredible experience. And our company chef at A16 is born in Tokyo, but has for many years lived in the Bay Area and settled down, met his wife here, and has a family. And so getting from the East Bay to San Francisco is almost the same as getting to Napa. So that's good.
We talk a lot here on the East Coast that the variety of wines that we can get in here on this side of the country is a little bit different than what is available on the West Coast. And we tend to think that everybody in California just drinks California wine, but that's not the case. Done all of this great stuff with showing these grape varieties from Italy that are indigenous to Italy and only generally have grown there, but you've tried to make some inroads in making them either more available to the consumer, and you've also got a vineyard in California as well, correct?
Yes. So in the early COVID years, I started a project with my partner, Kitty Osseline, and we called it Tansy. And it's Italian grapes grown in Northern California, organically farmed. And our friend Megan Glab, who is a sommelier turned winemaker, she grew up in restaurants in Monterey. And we have our wines tend to be on the lower alcohol side and lighter, leaner, really refreshing. But now we have about 8 different SKUs. During 2020, we did a pop-up in a really cool part of Mendocino called Boonville, and we ended up being able to source a Pinot Noir from up in the Signal Ridge Vineyard that is owned by Roger Scomenga, and he helped us do our pop-up there, which lasted about 6 weeks, but you really get to know the community there. And then we have a Falangina from a vineyard called Las Chimas that's pretty new and popular in our small Italian grapes of California wine makers group, which is a really cool direction to see because in California, Italian grapes growing here makes so much sense. And a lot of winemakers are starting to plant more and more of them. So you'll see them in the market a bit more than we used to, but there's still small vineyards planted to them. But we just did an event called the Festival of Forgotten Grapes. And so it was a walk around tasting of all kinds of grapes being grown, mostly in California, that you would be surprised to learn and know. And a lot, could come from Central Coast to Santa Barbara, Northern California, Lodi, the Sierra foothills. And also for us, just because I've been so focused on Italian grapes for so long, when we make Vermentino, let's say from Las Brisas Vineyard in Carneros, one of our coworkers he's from Sardinia and tasted it, he's one of the people who recommends it the most because we want to taste like the grape and like why I love this grape so much. We also have a Fiano. So these are all things that are near and dear to our heart in terms of grapes. And we're going to be so bold to get certified with a Neapolitan Pizza Association called the VPN and serve our closest to Neapolitan pizza as we can here without being in Naples. It's the same with grapes. It's like we can grow Fiano, we can grow Vermentino, and it's really a beautiful world. It's a wonderful world of things where you can just have possibilities and see them actually happen and come to life. So
let's talk a little bit more about the restaurant, Shelley. A16 Pizza. And when I first heard it, I'm like, around here, there's a pizza shop on every corner. I'm just amazed that when I look at the menu, I've heard great things about the wine list. What would our listeners see that's unique about your restaurant and your wine list if they were to go to A16 Pizza?
Well, I think that if you've been to Italy and had the same feeling I had with it's all ingredient driven and seems so simple. Why isn't everything always this as delicious as it is? And when you're in Italy, and it always, I think in hospitality, things do seem a lot easier than they actually are, because you're in there as a guest and you want to be, and you're out to enjoy. And so that was one of the things that I hope people realize, even if they're not at the moment that they're having their meal with us, is that we have many wines that will will go with any dish, depending on what you like. We have about 40 wines by the glass and half bottle carafe. And then we have very simple salads, but the little gems come from not that far away. The arugula's got like a character, it's like you really taste the freshness of and care that goes into making things like our fresh ricotta or mozzarella. And then when you add those to the pizza or the pasta, it's one of the great gifts of being involved with food and wine to enjoy it.
Are the wines and food in Tokyo the same as here?
Yes, they are. There's a smaller wine program in Tokyo. It's amazing because the ingredients they are getting like 100%. They've really have a program where everything's on the organic farm. And the wines, things are delivered on a micro scale because it's just so cool. I don't know how everything's just amazing and it's so efficient and organized in how they deliver. Like we're used to getting cases of wine dropped off, or there it's like by the quantity, the bottle quantity you want, so it's just a much smaller operation. And they have things like they have like cake hour, so they'll have desserts in the middle afternoon. It's a very popular thing where people go out for desserts in the afternoon.
I want cake hour.
I know. It's a very civilized, cool thing. Yeah. So there's a couple variations. Like if you order, we're used to getting a bunch of basil, and each leaf is wrapped in a little, is separated and wrapped individually. And so there's some differences, but you can still get the same.
Thank you for listening to The Wonderful World of Wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio. You can find us on our website, thewww.wine. Today, we have a very special guest. Shelley Lindgren is here. She's a restaurateur, author, and a winery owner. And you can find Shelley at a16pizza.com. Our past episodes of our show, you can go to SoundCloud and iTunes. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Wonderful World of Wine. Welcome back. We're talking with Shelley Lindgren. And Shelley, now I want to move on to your books. You're also an author. You had 3 books. Your latest is The Italian Wine, History, Regions, and Grapes of an Iconic Wine Country. I love seeing how people approach Italian wine and how they write about it. Of course, you covered every region. Can you talk about the goal of your book and what our listeners can learn from it?
Sure. For our third book, it's Kate Leahy and I are co-authors on all the books, and she worked here. A16 was her first book, and she's gone on to do dozens and very interesting corners of the world and things. But she worked here at A16, and the first book we did focus on the south of Italy, and it was half wine, half food. And so we have recipes in there and stories about the wines, and it's such limited information then. And then our next book was a restaurant that I had co-founded and had for 12 years called SPQR that took you, the wine list went down the Roman roads. And so we took that book that way, and it was north and central Italy and also recipes. So it was like half and half. Then 10 Speed Press, our publisher, asked us to do a wine book, just focused completely on wine. And it was going to be the new Italian wine, but it ended up being just Italian wine. And Kate and I both found that when we were doing our research over the years, that the history is such an important part of understanding why there's so many grapes. There's really not a second in even close contender on the amount of grapes that Italy has and what makes it such a unique, just like massive peninsula that's coastal and volcanic and mountainous. And there's a couple, just a couple regions that aren't touching the water, but they have beautiful lakes and things. So it's like always these influences that have shaped why their local grapes grow there, and the wine is a huge part of its not only of its economy, its lifestyle, its identity, and tells a story.
We talk a lot about that story part of it.
So
and
much.
that is such an important aspect of wine and of food and wine together. And we always seem to come back to Italy as being like one of those places where the storytelling with the connection between the grapes, the land, the people, and the wines themselves and the food, and putting all of that together. And it really highlights this whole like cultural thing about Italy. And then because there are so many of us here in the United States that are of Italian descent, like we latch on to that part of it and be like, oh, we're Italian also. And that just, I think, connection, especially with food, can be such a powerful I don't know, motivator for people to either learn more or to find new wines to enjoy. And I think that that's one of the ways that people really can understand Italian wine is kind of latching onto that story and that the people part of it.
Oh, it's so cool to just go to any region. People ask me all the time, where should I go in Italy? And there's really not a wrong answer because you're going to find wine and really cool traditions and a beautiful setting no matter where you go. Always a good idea to go.
Yeah, and Kim's mentioned food a few times here, and one of the questions I had for you, Shelley, was in the book, in every region, as you said, you mention foods in that area, and there's the saying, "What grows together goes together." It's like the perfect phrase describing Italian food and wine. Can you give a classic example of that for our listeners? And is that the whole basis for when you create the wine list for your restaurant?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm always thinking about the combination of wine and food. I'm a server at heart, and that's my goal is for me to find on our list is something that you're going to enjoy together. But I also have many times tried different wines I thought would go with a dish, just knowing what the dish is and what the wines are. And I can surprise myself, and say, this wine actually goes better because until you taste it, it really is combining the flavors, and seasons play a big part of that. The weather plays a big part of that. We have a winemaker dinner tomorrow night, and they come from Campania in the Campi Flegrei area. It's just north of Naples, and where Falanghina is a type of Falanghina. It's Falanghina Flegrei, and their stories are just absolutely beautiful and layered from generations of winemaking to being what they're able to make today, and having there be a lot more interest. Just having the information of the stories of the grapes, whether it was Palangina being brought from the Greek colonization time, but actually like when it settles into a certain area and how it becomes its own style and its own, like they'll say our Palangina is different from the Palangina from 30 miles away, completely different. And even though it's called the same thing. And so it can be confusing, but when you learn to embrace the chaos and just enjoy the beauty for what it is, it becomes really fun.
Have you ever found an example where a food from a region really didn't go well with the wine from that region? And you said, I don't know why they drink that there with this food?
We see. Well, I think there's a lot of like things that seem to be the norm. Like you would say, I'll have marinated anchovies and a crisp white wine, or what's going to go with this artichoke, for example. And there is parts of like, say, Sicily. And Sicily, they will say the way they describe wines and things, it is based around what they would also have to eat. So sometimes they say, do you smell the anchovies or the sardines in the Nero d'Avola? And they want that. They want you to have that, from my experience. And I think that's so cool because I happen to love them. And, they just, it's something that you're seaside, there's big fishing community. And it's like, you don't always think of a red wine to go with fish like a sardine, but it actually goes really well. They might put like pine nuts or some kind of currants with it or roast it. And also they have that incredible olive oil. So that's the secret.
I love that idea of the certain regions, and there might be a combination that you don't necessarily think is going to work, and then you try it and then it does. But then sometimes, like you said, there are some combinations that don't necessarily work, Mark. I know that I keep like a big long list of like, oh, this was really good, because sometimes they're counterintuitive. And that the whole idea of like this is less about learning the rules and just trying it and putting it together and see how those combinations actually work with each other in the here and now.
I couldn't agree more. I like, and the same with, there's whites that age phenomenally from Italy. Not every single grape will, but there's some that are just noble, and you could almost drink them as you would drink a red in the way that you pair them, from Mount Etna, the Etna Biancos, to Fiano di Avellino, to Verdicchio from Le Marche. It's just, these are grapes that produce incredible white wines, and the list goes on and on. So
Kim and I are always, for years, been promoting to our listeners Italian whites are just amazing to drink. So
yes,
now we need your advice for Italian white wine drinkers who are only drinking Pinot Grigio.
Yep.
How can we get them to try these wines? Do you feel they have to have food, or is there another way they can explore them to get them off the Pinot Grigio? What's the best advice for
Well,
that?
I did notice when I was in Boston doing that list with my friend that there was like the same Pinot Grigio almost at every restaurant. And I'm like, why is this Pinot Grigio at almost every restaurant? Because I just didn't like, I know that everyone has their own liquor laws and companies they work with, but I did notice that. So I think that when you go to a restaurant or a wine shop, and if you've had that Pinot Grigio, just to try something different and just ask them what they have that you really enjoyed that Pinot Grigio. But if like you like a light or lean style, or you want a little bit of richness to it, maybe hopefully there's like just some great places locally that you can go and explore a bit more. Or maybe there's something else. It's hard when you know what you like and like you're in your comfort zone and you're just like, I just want to make sure I'm having a glass of something I like. But then there's this whole other world of wines that you'd be surprised on the quality of what is out there. And so that's where people like myself would come in and say, oh, you like that? How about trying this? That's sort of what I have done over this career in Italian wines, because I was like, I'm not trying to sell you something. I really believe that this wine is amazing, and I'm happy to, if you say I like Sancerre and I'm recommending an Italian white that's going to be similar with minerality and leanness and complexity, then I would not make them drink something if they felt like it didn't match up to what they were expecting. And it's been very rare that that would happen, that somebody said, I didn't love this. In fact, it's more often that people start to say, like, what Fiano are you pouring tonight? They find a different wine that they know they can only get here. But I mean, they could probably find it somewhere else, but not that often. And then you discover that there are some really cool, also like a little knowledge can actually save you some money, because there's a lot of value still in Italian wines. Some are getting more expensive, but I think that there's just so much wine out there.
I like your point about getting the consumer or getting your diner to take that first step, to try that first new thing, and realizing more often than not that, oh yeah, this is really the style of wine that I like, and what else is out there. And it sounds like you have that table side manner, and probably instill that also in everybody in your restaurant, like this comfort level for people, because it really is a comfort zone thing, like you mentioned. And sometimes it's scary for people to try new things, but sounds like, that taking that first step, trying something new, getting a little bit uncomfortable, and then learning that, oh yeah, there are all these other wines out there that are really cool and that are really delicious.
I have a question I always ask Italian wine people on the show, but I'm going to ask you a little different. I always want to ask the opinion of how do I explain the Italian wine laws to people and hear how people say that to wine drinkers. But I want to ask you a little different as far as a winery owner and an Italian wine expert, how do you feel about the Italian wine laws versus American wine laws?
That's a great question. I think that in Italy, it's so much different because there's just a lot more grapes. And so what's allowed in areas is so much different from California, which seems like just a bigger, broader. I think California is almost the same size as Italy, but in Italy, it's been with all the regions, they have their own laws within the region and also within the wine growing area. So I think that some things I like to remind people about is saying, like, you like Barolo, you like Barbaresco, Brunello di Montalcino. There are other areas that have these incredible reds whose laws are the same to age things like Terrassi or Reservas from Abruzzo and in the Montepulciano d'Abruzzos, and it goes on and on. There's Reservas in Calabria that cracks me up because it's like Ciro, Rosso, Superiore, Classico, Reserva. The whole thing is on the label, and I think it makes me smile so much. And then there's a lot up and coming. But in California, it's not that it's less strict. I feel like our laws, where it gets really strange in California is, and I'm sure you feel it this way in Boston or New York, feel is similar, where we still have these really silly prohibition laws that stuck around. They just like didn't change, where we have things like tied house rules or, different laws that seem to be from a time when there was prohibition.
We couldn't sell wine on Sundays 20 years ago in Massachusetts.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what but nowadays, that that's out the window, right? Or do people still abide by that?
Well, that's why you still
we have
see
some
that.
times, right? Don't you?
Yeah.
Can't you
Well,
not
no,
open early on Sundays or something,
there's
Mark?
still some weird things, but that's
Yeah.
the main thing you observe is why you see that same Pinot Grigio on everybody's list.
Yeah.
It comes back to that. But do you feel like the Italian laws lead to better quality or better value? As you said, there's so many wines out there. Do you feel that leads to better quality?
I think that it depends. Like, take a great example, I think, is take the Prosecco, which became so wildly popular and had a really kind of broader area that you can sell tens of millions of bottles of Prosecco at lower cost. And it wasn't bad at all. But there's some Prosecco areas that are now called Prosecco Superiore, which is a smaller part of the area that you're going to find like such amazing Prosecco Superiore. So the Superiore, we're supposed to be able to say that in our American way, but it's not so easy to understand. But if you're from the Veneto, you're like, there's a big difference. And you get it when you're there, but then you get back and, when we're looking at bottles, does that Superiore, does it really work here? Is it the same effect that they are hoping for? I mean, we found it in Chianti and Tuscany as well, where there's just so many parts of regions, like little pockets of Chianti. And so if you know that you're having a Chianti from Rada, it's going to be high elevation, very red fruit. But if you're going to have a Rufina or something different, I mean, it's more about geography in a sense, I would say, and how large of quantities. Like, so there are some politics I think that definitely play into the laws, but you kind of threw it a little bit, I guess.
I just wanted to ask Shelley a question. You obviously answer a lot of questions about Italian wine and food. What is one question on Italian wine or Italian food that no one's ever asked you that you wish someone's asked you that question?
That's putting her on the spot.
I think the hardest question for me is when someone asks me what my favorite Italian wine is, because I can never answer. And what I said yesterday might be different than today. I mean, there's certain things that I gravitate to if I was going to pick a nightly wine or something. I think the hardest question would probably be, why don't I have Tuscan or Piedmonte wines on the list? And we actually have a couple now that, since we've had like different wine clubs and like things over the years, and we have guests visiting winemakers and things, but our focus has really like been to have wines that go with our food. And we're a Southern Italian restaurant, so these Southern Italian wines, there's so many fantastic ones, and you can't have every wine on your list. You have to, and so we took a point of view that this is something we really focus on and specialize in. So when you are a guest here, try a Fiano d'Avellino, because you're going to have a large selection to choose from. Whereas if I tried to have everything on the list, I might have less of what really goes with our food the best to choose from. So we try to get a lot of depth into the options, and that also provides a wider price range. So you can be out, for a casual night, or be out celebrating and find something that fits what your evening is going to look like. And so I think that, like, I was out, this is going to sound super silly, and I don't even know why I'm mentioning it, but I was out at a restaurant, and I was with coworkers, and we were just doing some finishing up an event at a winery, and we went to go grab we ended up getting a bottle of champagne. We're just like, what should we have? White champagne. And the sommelier came over, and he was like, there's actual laser beams in this champagne. And it's like, we still laugh about it because we're just, I don't know if we were just being giddy, but I was like, have I ever said anything like that? Like, I was just thinking about
actual laser beams.
And I'm like, well, how do we not get it if there's laser beams? And I'm just picturing like little cats or something. Or I'm like, I don't know.
I might have to steal that one.
There's actual laser beams. And it was so funny.
So do you have your wines on your list?
Yes.
Yeah. And how can our listeners, I know you're not distributed in mass. Are you doing any distribution or is it all online
Oh,
sales?
we hope to be. We just started distributing here. It took us a while, but we were in our fifth vintage, and we're with a company called Springboard here. But we are starting to branch out into other states, and so Massachusetts would be amazing to be available. But we can ship if you go to tansywines.com. We have a great shipping facility that is able to send our wines to like over 40 states. It's really been efficient, and we have lots of, let's see, we have, well, we're about to have 9 SKUs. We're adding in Davila from Foxhill Vineyard in Mendocino this fall, but we have a nice bright whites and a beautiful rosé that we buy the Aglianico grapes just for the rosé. And Aglianico is a grape that can be, high in alcohol, high in tannins, high in acidity. And this one we have, it's light, it's under 12% alcohol, but it still has, so it has retained the acidity, but it feels like a kind of like a dried rose petals, I guess you would say. And the rosés are so much fun, especially as the weather gets a little warmer.
Have you seen any issues over the past 5 years of a climate affecting the Italian white varietals you're growing there? We were talking to a gentleman from Lodi. They're growing a lot of Italian, but they have a very consistent climate. Are you noticing any issues?
Well, I think that we have Megan Glove's such a great winemaker, and she shares the philosophy of when to pick. And we end up picking the whites on the earlier side, but we have a Cabernet from Coombsville from Glass Rock Vineyard and in Napa. So this one, it ended up being the one they picked last, but then you wouldn't think that when you tasted it, it still has a lightness to it. It's got a red fruit. So sometimes you want to, depending on what the grape is, you want to wait for the right moment. You don't want it to be overripe, but you sometimes don't want to pick it too soon. It's really quite a delicate dance.
Well, you have your fingers in a lot of pies out there. I give you a lot of credit. I think it's amazing everything you do.
Like cake hour, right?
I like cake. I like pies. I like pizzas.
Well, Shelley, thank you. Thank you so much for telling our listeners about all you do and the book. Don't forget to our listeners, the Italian wine, the history, regions, and grapes, iconic wine country. And A16 Pizza, if you're in California, check them out and order the wines online from tansywinery.com. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, with our special guest, Shelley Lindgren. You can find more information about our show at our Facebook page, The Wonderful World of Wine, and also on our website, thewww.wine. We are supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find Shelley at a16pizza.com and on Instagram at a16sf. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wine, wine, wine.